My cousin had just moved into her dream home, a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and friendly faces. Or at least, that's what she thought when she signed the papers. She believed this new chapter of her life would be peaceful, but she didn't know yet that peace was the last thing the neighborhood's self-proclaimed queen, Karen from the HOA, would allow. From the very first day, trouble began. Karen wasn't just an HOA member. She acted like she was the HOA. She strutted around with a clipboard, sunglasses perched on her nose like a crown, as if she had been elected the mayor of the street. She stopped my cousin on her moving day, tapping her foot impatiently, demanding to know why the moving truck was parked for too long. Imagine that. Before even unpacking a box, my cousin was already on Karen's radar. And here's the twist. What Karen didn't know, what made the story explode later, was that my cousin wasn't just any new neighbor. She wasn't someone who would fold under fake authority or intimidation. She was a state senator, a woman who had debated in the Capitol written laws and defended people's rights in front of thousands. But to Karen, she was just another target to belittle. And that mistake, it would come back to haunt her in ways she never saw coming. You see, Karen thrived on control. She loved being the loudest voice in the room, the one who could shame others into submission. She would lecture people about their lawns, trash bins, and even the shade of paint on their doors. She treated rules not as guidelines, but as weapons. And my cousin? She became Karen's obsession. Every little thing turned into a complaint. Your grass is half an inch too tall. Your wreath is not HOA approved. Your guest parked on the wrong side. It was like Karen had built her entire existence around breaking my cousin down. But here's the thing. My cousin wasn't just some fragile neighbor hoping to avoid conflict. She had spent years listening to heated debates, standing her ground, and standing up for people who didn't have a voice. She had backbone, and Karen had no idea who she was messing with. The first real showdown happened on a sunny Saturday morning. My cousin had invited some friends and family over for a small housewarming barbecue. The smell of burgers and laughter filled the air. Kids were running around in the yard. It was the kind of simple joy that makes you feel like you're finally home. But for Karen, joy was an offense. She stormed over, clipboard in hand, wagging her finger like she was writing someone a ticket. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice slicing to the laughter. "This is not an approved gathering. You cannot have more than 6 cars parked on the street, and your grill is too close to the fence. It's a safety violation." Everyone fell silent, the warmth of the gathering turning icy in seconds. My cousin, cool as ever, smiled politely. "Karen, it's a family barbecue. Everyone is parked legally, and the grill is perfectly safe." But Karen didn't back down. "Rules are rules," she barked. "If you can't respect this community, maybe you shouldn't be living here." That's when the shift happened. My cousin's smile didn't fade, but her tone sharpened the way it does when she's standing on the Senate floor. She looked Karen dead in the eyes and said, "Respect goes both ways, and intimidation doesn't work on me." The silence grew thicker. Some neighbors pretended not to watch, but you could see curtains twitching. Others looked down, afraid of being Karen's next target. But in that moment, Karen's mask cracked. She wasn't used to someone talking back, especially not with that calm confidence. Still, Karen doubled down. Over the next few weeks, she flooded my cousin's mailbox with violations, each one more absurd than the last. A small garden flag? Not approved. A seasonal wreath? Distracting. Even the color of her curtains became an issue. It was harassment dressed up as policy. And here's where it gets interesting. My cousin didn't shout. She didn't rage. Instead, she documented everything. Every letter, every petty note, every unannounced visit from Karen. She built a file, the same way she'd build a case against corruption or abuse of power in her work. Because that's what this was, an abuse of power, just in miniature. One night, I was visiting her, and she showed me the stack of papers. "She thinks she can bully me into silence," my cousin said, her voice steady but her eyes burning with determination. "But she doesn't realize who she's dealing with." And that was the moment I knew Karen had no chance. My cousin had fought tougher battles in government than this self-proclaimed neighborhood dictator. But what happened next? Oh, that's when the story really exploded. The next chapter in this battle started with the neighborhood newsletter. Karen was in charge of it. Of course she was. And she decided to use it as her personal megaphone. In the very next issue, tucked between gardening tips and community announcements, was a thinly veiled attack aimed directly at my cousin. It read something like, "Some new residents believe they are above the rules, but this community values order and respect. Violators will be dealt with." No names, but everyone knew exactly who she meant. People whispered about it during morning walks, some shaking their heads, others too afraid to say anything out loud. Karen wanted to shame my cousin publicly, to paint her as a villain. But here's the thing. Karen didn't understand how politics works. My cousin had spent years being targeted by smear campaigns far nastier than a neighborhood newsletter. She didn't crumble. Instead, she smiled and told me, if she wanted to play public games, then she better be ready for public truth. And oh, did the truth come. A few days later, my cousin attended the monthly HOA meeting. Now, most people dread these meetings. They sit quietly, nodding along, praying no one notices them. But my cousin, she walked in like she was entering a Senate hearing. Calm, confident, ready? She sat near the front, listening patiently as Karen rattled off her usual agenda items. Then came the violations section. Karen's voice grew sharper, louder, as she read out a long list of complaints, all directed at my cousin. Lawn not trimmed to standard. Unapproved decorations. Noise complaints from the barbecue. Even something about her recycling bin being placed 6 inches off the curb. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Some were embarrassed for Karen. Others looked terrified, knowing they could be next. Finally, my cousin raised her hand. The room fell silent. "Karen," she began, her voice steady and respectful, "I'd like to respond." Karen smirked, clearly believing she had the upper hand. "By all means," she said, dripping with sarcasm. And then my cousin did what she does best. She dismantled every single accusation with facts, clarity, and calm strength. She pulled out the HOA's own handbook, flipping to the sections Karen had twisted. She showed photos, timestamps, even witness statements. One by one, she proved Karen's claims were baseless. By the time she finished, the room wasn't silent out of fear anymore. It was silent out of awe. Karen's face turned crimson. She wasn't used to being challenged, much less being outsmarted in front of her audience. She stammered, tried to change the subject, but it was too late. The neighbors had seen through her. They realized that Karen's power came not from rules, but from intimidation. And when intimidation failed, she was exposed. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no, if anything, being embarrassed in that meeting only fueled her fire. She doubled her efforts, showing up at my cousin's house unannounced, snapping photos of her yard, even measuring her mailbox with a ruler like some sort of parody villain. At one point, she stood in the driveway yelling about how this community doesn't need outsiders who think they're special. And that's when my cousin finally snapped, not in anger, but in truth. She stepped forward and said, "Karen, I'm not just your neighbor. I'm a state senator. I write the very laws that protect people from harassment and abuse of power. And I promise you, your behavior is exactly what those laws are meant to stop." Karen froze. For the first time, she looked small. But before you think this is where the story ends, it doesn't. Because Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat. She tried one last desperate move that ended up changing the entire neighborhood forever.